The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched in all directions, like a colossal stone bowl carved from the heart of an asteroid. Light from 3 artificial suns filtered through crystalline panels, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the assembly of 62 species, representing the most powerful civilizations in the known universe. Floating platforms housed delegations of gaseous beings. Temperature-controlled pods contained representatives who breathed methane or sulfur. Aquatic chambers bubbled with delegates from water worlds. And then there was the human delegation. 3 figures in navy blue uniforms adorned with the silver and gold insignia of Earth's United Stellar Authority. They sat at a simple curved table, looking decidedly ordinary among the exotic assembly. Ambassador Jake Morrison leaned forward, his weathered face betraying no emotion as he studied the High Counselor. A 12-foot-tall Alteran with iridescent skin that shifted between blue and purple hues. Admiral Lisa Carter sat to his right, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, jaw tight with barely concealed tension. She had personally witnessed the pirate attacks on Kepler, had seen the mangled bodies of colonists strewn across burning settlements. Director Paul Hayes completed their trio, datapad in hand, eyes constantly scanning the chamber, evaluating reactions and alliances. "The human petition has been distributed to all members," announced the High Counselor, voice translated and amplified through the chamber's acoustic system. Ambassador Morrison requests emergency intervention against pirate attacks in the Kepler sector and provisional rights to extract resources from the Kepler asteroid belt to fund defensive measures for their colonies. Jake rose, stepping to the central podium. He was not a tall man, but decades of diplomatic service had given him presence. Esteemed members of the Council, I speak today not just as Earth's representative, but as the voice of 7 million human colonists spread across 12 systems. For the 3rd time in as many months, our settlement on Kepler 452b has suffered devastating attacks by pirate forces. 43 civilians were killed in the most recent raid. Our defensive capabilities are stretched thin. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Jake continued, voice steady. We've identified the asteroid belt in the Kepler system as containing rare metals crucial for upgrading our planetary defense systems. We request temporary extraction rights, limited to military necessities, with environmental impact monitoring, as stipulated in Galactic Treaty 347.9. The Thraxian delegate, a mantis-like being with multifaceted eyes, clicked its mandibles. The Kepler belt lies within the designated conservation zone. Opening it for resource extraction would create a dangerous precedent. These are exceptional circumstances, Jake countered. The safety of our people. Humans always claim exceptional circumstances, interrupted the Vordilian representative, its gelatinous form pulsating with agitation. 300 years in the Council, and still, you fail to understand the principles of galactic harmony. Admiral Carter's knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the table. She had warned Jake that this would happen. The Council had always treated humanity as the galactic newcomers, primitives, lucky to have a seat at the table. We understand harmony, Jake replied, his diplomat smile never wavering. We also understand our responsibility to protect our citizens. The pirates targeting our colonies appear highly organized, possibly with advanced technology beyond typical outlaws. We suspect. Your suspicions are not evidence, the High Counselor interrupted. The Council has heard your petition. We shall now vote on the human request for provisional resource extraction rights in the Kepler belt. Jake returned to his seat as the voting commenced. 3-dimensional displays appeared before each delegation, registering their decisions. Paul Hayes leaned close to Jake's ear. This isn't going well. Jake nodded almost imperceptibly. He had served as Earth's ambassador for nearly 15 years, navigating the complex web of galactic politics, making allies and avoiding enemies. But he had never seen the Council so united in opposition to a human request. The High Counselor's voice rang out with finality. The vote is complete. 47 species oppose the human petition. 12 abstain. 3. The humans and their traditional allies, the Arcturians and Taucedians, approve. The petition is denied. Admiral Carter exhaled slowly. Director Hayes tapped notes into his datapad, face expressionless. Jake stared at the voting display, seeing more than just numbers. He saw condescension, dismissal. The Council didn't merely disagree with the human position. They considered it beneath serious consideration. For 3 centuries, humanity had played by the Council's rules. They had accepted restrictions on their expansion, limitations on their technology, oversight of their military development. They had believed in the promise of galactic community, of shared wisdom and mutual protection. And now, when human lives were at stake, the Council had responded with indifference. Jake stood again, moving back to the podium without being recognized by the High Counselor, a breach of protocol that sent a shockwave through the chamber. Ambassador Morrison, the High Counselor began. The vote has concluded. The next petition. I wish to address the Council on a matter of urgent importance, Jake said, his voice carrying an edge that silenced the chamber. The High Counselor hesitated, then inclined his elongated head. Proceed, but briefly. Jake reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, cylindrical device. He placed it on the podium, and a holographic document materialized above it. I present to the Council, in accordance with Article 72 of the Charter of Galactic Unity, formal notice of Earth's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates rose from their seats, translators struggling to keep up with the barrage of exclamations and protests. The High Counselor's skin flashed a brilliant crimson, a sign of extreme agitation among Alterans. Ambassador! This is unprecedented, the High Counselor declared. No species has ever voluntarily withdrawn from the Council. Then humanity shall be the first, Jake replied, his voice calm amidst the tumult. For 300 years, we have contributed to this body, respected its decisions, adapted our civilization to its consensus. But today has made one thing clear. When it comes to the fundamental right of self-defense, the Council regards human lives as expendable. He deactivated the hologram and pocketed the device. Earth and its colonies will now pursue their own path. We will defend our people by whatever means we deem necessary. We will develop technologies and alliances that serve our interests. We will no longer be bound by treaties that protect everyone except humans. The Draconian representative, a reptilian humanoid with scaled skin the color of burnished copper, rose from his seat. This is nothing but petulance. The humans cannot simply— We can, and we have, Jake interrupted. The withdrawal document has already been transmitted to the Council archives. It bears the signatures of Earth Security Council and Colonial Congress, as required by our laws. This is not a negotiating tactic. It is a final decision. He turned to Admiral Carter and Director Hayes, who had risen to stand beside him. We have nothing further to discuss with this body. The 3 humans turned in unison and began walking toward the chamber's massive doors. Behind them, the cacophony grew. Some delegates shouted threats, others pleaded for reconsideration. A few, very few, watched in silence, perhaps understanding the significance of what they were witnessing. As they reached the doors, Jake paused and looked back at the assembly. For a brief moment, his diplomatic mask fell away, revealing the steel beneath. The day mankind departed the Galactic Council, he said, voice carrying across the now hushed chamber, was the day the universe learned that humans are not to be underestimated. The doors closed behind them with a resonant thud that echoed through the council chamber like a death knell. In the corridor outside, Admiral Carter finally allowed herself to speak freely. That was decisive. "It was necessary," Jake replied. "We've been building toward this moment for years. The pirates were just the catalyst." Director Hayes activated his secure communicator. "The withdrawal is confirmed. I'm transmitting the authorization codes now." Jake nodded. "How long before the first phase is operational?" "The lunar facilities have been ready for months," Carter answered. "The Titan base can be fully activated within 72 hours. Mars Defense Command is already on standby." "And Project Ghost Hunter?" Hayes' thin lips curved in a rare smile. "Dr. Foster reports that the prototype exceeded all expectations in the last test. We can begin full production immediately." Jake took a deep breath. "Then it begins." The withdrawal of humanity from the Galactic Council sent shockwaves across civilized space. Initially, most species dismissed it as a temporary tantrum, expecting the humans to come crawling back once they realized the impossibility of surviving without Council protection and trade benefits. They were wrong. Within days of the withdrawal, Earth's colonies began mobilizing. Mining operations that had been quietly established in remote asteroid fields suddenly expanded. Research stations that had officially been studying cultural development revealed themselves as military installations. Transport ships that had been registered as civilian vessels dropped their pretenses and revealed weapon systems that had been cleverly concealed from Council inspectors for decades. On Kepler 452b, the devastated settlement was rapidly rebuilt, this time surrounded by defensive systems that violated at least 7 Council prohibitions. On New Montana, vast underground facilities opened to reveal shipyards where vessels of unfamiliar design were under construction. On Tau Ceti A, human scientists worked alongside their Arcturian allies, pursuing research into quantum physics that the Council had long declared too dangerous to explore. 3 weeks after Earth's withdrawal, Admiral Carter stood on the observation deck of the lunar facility, known officially as Armstrong Research Station. Unofficially, it had been the heart of humanity's contingency plan for nearly 50 years. "Status report," she demanded as Jake and Hayes joined her. 17 patrol vessels deployed to Kepler," the station commander replied. "No pirate activity detected since our withdrawal announcement." "Interesting timing," Jake remarked. "Almost as if someone was coordinating those attacks." "The Draconians," Carter suggested. "They've opposed human expansion from the beginning." "Perhaps," Hayes said. "But our intelligence suggests something more complex. The pirates have suddenly disappeared from all their known bases. Not retreated, disappeared." Jake frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that someone wanted to provoke exactly the response we've given. They wanted us out of the Council." "To what end?" Before Hayes could answer, an alert sounded. The station commander turned to the holographic display. "Priority message from Tau Ceti. The Draconian Empire has delayed their scheduled military exercises near the Orion cluster." "Delayed or cancelled?" Carter asked sharply. "Delayed, Admiral. They've rescheduled for next month." Jake exchanged glances with Hayes. "They're reassessing." "Yes," Hayes agreed. "They expected us to be isolated and vulnerable after leaving the Council. Instead, they've discovered we're more prepared than anyone suspected." "How long before they realize the full extent of our preparations?" Carter asked. Hayes consulted his datapad. "Current estimates suggest 6 to 8 months before Council intelligence services piece together an accurate picture. By then, it will be too late to stop us," Jake finished. Carter's expression hardened. "They'll try anyway." She was right. 5 months after Earth's withdrawal, the Draconian Empire dispatched a battle fleet of 1,000 warships toward the human colony of New Seattle. Their official declaration, transmitted across all frequencies, claimed they were acting to neutralize unauthorized military development and protect galactic stability. In reality, it was the first move in what they expected to be the swift subjugation of humanity. The Draconian fleet, commanded by General Carthel, a veteran of 17 interstellar campaigns, approached New Seattle with supreme confidence. Their ships formed the classic Draconian spearhead formation, designed to penetrate planetary defenses with overwhelming force. "Approaching human colony," reported Carthel's sensor officer. "Minimal defensive installations detected. Their orbital platforms appear to be standard civilian structures." Carthel's scaled lips pulled back in what passed for a smile among his kind. "As expected. Without Council protection, they've had no time to develop serious defenses. Prepare the primary strike force." "General," his communications officer interrupted. "We're receiving a transmission from the human colony." "Put it through," Carthel ordered, expecting pleas for mercy. Instead, a stern-faced human appeared on the display. "Draconian Fleet, this is Governor Barnes of New Seattle. You are violating sovereign human territory. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Carthel laughed, a harsh sound like stones grinding together. "Your courage is admirable, Governor, but misplaced. You face the might of the Draconian Empire. Surrender your colony, and we will spare civilian lives." The human's expression didn't change. "You were warned." The transmission ended. Carthel turned to his tactical officer. "Begin the attack sequence." The Draconian fleet surged forward, and chaos erupted. What had appeared to be civilian satellites suddenly reconfigured, revealing weapon systems unlike anything the Draconians had encountered. From the surface of New Seattle's moon, concealed installations emerged from the regolith, their energy signatures spiking to levels that should have been impossible for human technology. "Quantum displacement detected," shouted the sensor officer, panic evident in his voice. "Multiple targets, they're using quantum weapons." Carthel's blood ran cold. Quantum weaponry had been theoretical, banned by the Council before development could progress beyond basic research. Somehow, the humans had not only continued that research, but perfected it. The lead ships of the Draconian fleet simply disappeared, not destroyed in conventional explosions, not reduced to debris, but erased from existence as quantum fields disrupted the very fabric of space-time around them. "Evasive action," Carthel ordered, but it was too late. The remaining Draconian ships found themselves caught in a carefully prepared trap. The seemingly empty space around New Seattle revealed itself to be seeded with quantum mines. The moon's craters concealed massive gun emplacements, and emerging from behind the planet came human vessels of unfamiliar design, their hulls absorbing scanning beams rather than reflecting them. In 27 minutes, the pride of the Draconian Empire was reduced to scattered survivors, fleeing in blind panic. Carthel, watching his flagship systems fail around him, managed to launch an escape pod moments before quantum disruption consumed the vessel. As his tiny craft tumbled through space, emergency beacons broadcasting his distress, Carthel stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. The humans had not just defeated his fleet, they had obliterated it using technology that should have been centuries beyond their capability. "How?" he whispered to the empty pod. "How did they hide this from us for so long?" The answer came 3 days later, when Carthel's pod was recovered, not by Draconian forces, but by a human patrol ship. He was brought to a secure facility on New Seattle's moon, where he found himself face to face with Ambassador Jake Morrison. "General Carthel," Jake greeted him, as if they were meeting at a diplomatic reception, rather than an interrogation chamber. "Welcome to Armstrong Base." "You were prepared for us," Carthel said, not bothering with pleasantries. "This was never about pirates or resource rights." Jake smiled thinly. "The pirates were real enough, your pirates, attacking our colonies on your orders." Carthel didn't deny it. "A test of your defenses. But this..." He gestured at the facility around them. "This is not something you developed in 5 months." "No," Jake agreed. "This is something we've been developing for 50 years, ever since we realized the Council would never truly accept humanity as equals." He activated a holographic display, showing schematics of technology that made Carthel's scales ripple with shock. Quantum weaponry, stealth systems that bent light around vessels, rendering them invisible to conventional sensors. Space-time folding drives that allowed ships to travel distances without crossing the intervening space. Project Ghost Hunter, Jake explained. Officially, a minor research initiative studying theoretical physics. In reality, humanity's insurance policy against the day when the Council's prejudice became too dangerous to tolerate. Impossible, Carthel protested. Council inspectors would have detected the same inspectors who could be bribed with a few rare artifacts, the same inspectors who never ventured beyond our main facilities because their environmental suits were uncomfortable. Jake shook his head. You all believed what you wanted to believe, that humans were clever but limited, resourceful but ultimately harmless. He leaned closer to the Draconian general. You made a fundamental error, General. You judged us by Council standards, by species that evolved in stable systems with abundant resources. Humanity evolved on a world of scarcity and competition. Our history is written in blood and innovation. We don't develop technology because it's permitted. We develop it because we need it to survive. The Council will not stand for this, Carthel warned. When they learn the extent of your deception— They already know, Jake interrupted. Or they're beginning to. Your defeat wasn't subtle. We made sure of that. He tapped a control, and the hologram shifted to show transmissions spreading across Council space, recordings of the battle, analysis of the human technology, speculation about what other secrets humanity might be hiding. By now, every major power is reassessing their position. The Thraxians have already withdrawn their forces from our border. The Vordilians are suddenly very interested in trade negotiations. Even the High Counselor has requested a private channel to discuss reconciliation. Jake deactivated the display. For 3 centuries, we played the role assigned to us, the eager students, grateful for the Council's guidance, all while we prepared for the moment when that masquerade would end. What happens now? Carthel asked, his voice subdued. Now? Jake considered the question. Now. The universe adjusts to a new reality, one where humanity is recognized not as a junior partner to be tolerated, but as a power to be respected. The aftermath of the Battle of New Seattle transformed the political landscape of the galaxy with breathtaking speed. Across Council space, the revelation of humanity's hidden capabilities sent governments into crisis mode. Defense ministries scrambled to assess the quantum technology that had so easily defeated the Draconians. Intelligence agencies frantically reviewed decades of data, searching for clues they had missed. In the months that followed, the borders of human space became the most heavily fortified and yet the most mysterious region in the galaxy. Council probe ships that approached too closely simply vanished. Unauthorized vessels that entered human systems found themselves escorted back to the border by ships that appeared from nowhere, their captains receiving polite but firm warnings. Rumors spread of vast construction projects throughout human territory, of research breakthroughs that defied conventional understanding of physics, of alliances with species that had previously been dismissed as minor powers. 1 year after the withdrawal, Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, Earth's first officially acknowledged quantum battleship. Through the viewport, she watched as a fleet of similar vessels took formation around Jupiter. What had once been hidden was now displayed with calculated openness, a reminder to any watching eyes of the consequences of aggression. Status report on the Tau Ceti deployment, she asked her executive officer. 20 vessels in position, Admiral. The Arcturians have integrated their defensive grid with ours. The quantum shield is operational and stable. Carter nodded with satisfaction. And the diplomatic situation? Ambassador Morrison reports that 17 former Council species have signed preliminary agreements with the Human Arcturian Alliance. 3 more are in final negotiations. Which ones? The Procyon, the Syrians, and the Rigelians. Carter raised an eyebrow. The Rigelians? They've been Council loyalists for millennia. They were impressed by our handling of the Draconian incursion. Her officer replied, with a hint of pride. And, apparently, they've had their own grievances with council leadership for some time. The Admiral turned as Director Hayes entered the bridge, accompanied by a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Admiral Carter," Hayes greeted her. "May I present Dr. Nina Foster, Chief Architect of Project Ghost Hunter, and the mind behind our quantum breakthrough." Carter extended her hand. "Dr. Foster, your work has changed the course of human history." Foster accepted the handshake with a modest nod. "My team deserves the credit. Dr. Kevin Brooks, Janet Mills, Dan Murphy. We all contributed pieces to the puzzle." "Tell me," Carter said, gesturing toward the viewport and the fleet beyond. "When you began this work 50 years ago, did you imagine it would lead here?" Foster's expression grew contemplative. "Not exactly here. No. We were focused on solving theoretical problems, pushing boundaries. The military applications came later, when we realized how the Council would react to our discoveries. And now? Now we have an opportunity that comes perhaps once in the life of a civilization," Foster replied. "A chance to reshape our relationship with the galaxy on terms of equality rather than subservience." Hayes' communicator chimed. He checked the message and looked up with an expression of interest. "The Alteran diplomatic vessel has arrived. They're requesting permission to dock." Carter exchanged glances with Foster. "The High Counselor's personal emissary, right on schedule." "What do you think they want?" Foster asked. "To understand how we deceived them for so long," Hayes suggested. "To assess whether we're a threat or a potential ally." "Both," Carter said decisively. "But mostly, they want to ensure they're on the winning side of whatever comes next." Hayes nodded. "Ambassador Morrison is already in the diplomatic reception area. Shall we join him?" As they made their way through the ship, Foster observed the crew at their stations. Humans working alongside Arcturians and Tau Cetians, each contributing their unique strengths to the Alliance. "It's remarkable how quickly we've adapted to our new position." "Humans have always been adaptable," Carter replied. "It's our greatest strength. The Council saw it as immaturity, our willingness to change, to discard traditions that no longer served us. They never understood that flexibility is evolutionary advantage." The diplomatic reception area was a spacious chamber designed to accommodate various physiologies. Jake Morrison stood near the entrance, dressed in the new diplomatic uniform of the Human Arcturian Alliance, charcoal gray with silver trim. Simple, yet elegant. "Admiral, Director, Doctor," he greeted them. "Our guests will be arriving momentarily." Foster studied the ambassador with curiosity. "Is it strange, meeting with them again after everything that's happened?" Jake's expression revealed nothing. "Diplomacy is always about managing changing circumstances. Doctor, yesterday's adversary may be tomorrow's ally." The door slid open, revealing the Alteran emissary, tall and elegant, skin shifting through shades of blue and green. Behind him came a familiar figure that caused Hayes to stiffen slightly. "Captain Zethar," Jake said, addressing the second Alteran. "I didn't expect to see Alteran intelligence represented in this delegation." Zethar's skin rippled with what might have been embarrassment. "I am here in an advisory capacity, Ambassador Morrison. My expertise in interspecies relations was deemed relevant." Jake nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Zethar had been hunting for the truth about humanity's secret developments for years. Now, he was being rewarded for his persistence, even if his warnings had come too late. "Welcome aboard the Defiance," Jake said formally. "Let us proceed to the conference room." The meeting that followed was a careful dance of diplomatic language, concealing harder realities. The Alteran emissary expressed the High Counselor's concern about humanity's technological developments, their disappointment at the secretive nature of these advancements, their hope for peaceful coexistence moving forward. Jake listened politely, offering neither apology nor explanation. When the emissary finally concluded his prepared statements, Jake leaned forward slightly. "The High Counselor has sent you to determine whether humanity poses a threat to the Council," he said bluntly. "The answer is, only if the Council chooses to make us one." "Your quantum weapons," the emissary began, "are defensive technologies," Jake interrupted. "Deployed to protect our sovereignty after 3 centuries of Council restrictions and condescension culminated in direct aggression against our colonies." "The draconian attack was not sanctioned by the Council," the emissary protested. "Yet neither was it condemned," Jake countered. "Just as the pirate attacks on Kepler were met with indifference. The Council has consistently demonstrated that human lives are of lesser value than political convenience." Captain Zethar spoke up, his analytical mind cutting through the diplomatic fog. "You planned this withdrawal for decades. The pirate attacks, the resource petition, these were merely the final triggers for a strategy long in development." Jake inclined his head, acknowledging the assessment without confirming it directly. "Let us speak plainly. Humanity entered the Galactic Council 300 years ago as supplicants, grateful for the knowledge and protection offered by elder species. We accepted limitations and oversight because we believed in the promise of galactic community." His voice hardened slightly. "But as decades passed, it became clear that the Council saw us not as equals to be integrated, but as children to be perpetually supervised. Our colonies were restricted, our research monitored, our military development constrained, all while species like the Draconians were permitted to maintain vast fleets that, coincidentally, positioned themselves near human space. "The Council has protocols for all emerging species," the emissary said stiffly. "For how long?" Jake asked. 300 years? 500? A millennium? At what point would humanity have graduated from emerging to established? Or was that transition always meant to be just beyond our reach? Silence fell across the conference room. Finally, the emissary spoke again, his tone more measured. "The political reality has changed. The High Counselor recognizes this. He wishes to extend an invitation for Earth to rejoin the Council, with special provisions acknowledging humanity's unique situation." Jake smiled without warmth. 5 years. "Pardon?" "Return to us in 5 years with that invitation. By then, the new balance of power will be fully established." The emissary's skin darkened with suppressed emotion. "Ambassador Morrison, surely you understand the importance of stability in galactic affairs. The Council has maintained peace for millennia." "Peace for whom?" Admiral Carter interjected. "Not for the colonies devastated by pirates. Not for species who fall from Council favor and find themselves isolated." "The Council system is imperfect," the emissary conceded. "But it is the foundation upon which interstellar civilization rests." "Perhaps it's time for new foundations," Jake suggested. "Or at least, significant renovations to the existing structure." The message was clear. Humanity would not be rushing back to its former position. Whatever relationship developed between Earth and the Council would be fundamentally different from what had come before. As the meeting concluded and the Alterans prepared to depart, Captain Zethar lingered behind his superior. He approached Jake with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "You concealed so much for so long," he said quietly. "The quantum research, the lunar base, the stealth technology. My best agents found nothing but hints and rumors." Jake regarded the intelligence officer thoughtfully. "Your agents were looking for military installations, for weapon systems, for obvious signs of rebellion. They weren't looking for cultural research outposts staffed by academics, or mining operations run by private corporations, or transport ships making routine cargo runs." "The perfect hiding place is in plain sight," Zethar mused. "Exactly. Everything we did was documented somewhere in Council records, just not in the categories your analysts were monitoring." Zethar's skin rippled with what might have been respect. "And now, what comes next in humanity's strategy?" Jake smiled enigmatically. That, Captain, depends largely on the Council's next moves. We prefer cooperation to conflict, but we will never again allow ourselves to be vulnerable. The 5 years that followed transformed the galactic landscape more profoundly than any period since the founding of the Council itself. The Human-Arcturian alliance expanded rapidly, attracting species who had long chafed under Council restrictions, but lacked the strength to challenge them independently. Quantum technology spread through human space, creating defensive networks that made direct military action against Alliance worlds virtually impossible. The Draconian Empire, humiliated by their defeat at New Seattle, retreated into isolation, their once expansionist policies replaced by paranoid border fortification. The Thraxians and Vordilians, longtime Council loyalists, found themselves increasingly marginalized as their influence waned. And at the center of it all, the Council itself struggled to maintain relevance in a galaxy where its authority was no longer absolute. Exactly 5 years after Jake Morrison had told the Alteran emissary to return with a new invitation, he stood once again in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council. This time, he was not seated at the human delegation's modest table, but stood as the representative of the Alliance, a coalition that now included 34 species and controlled nearly a third of known space. The chamber was noticeably less crowded than it had been 5 years earlier. Several delegations were absent, their species having withdrawn to join the Alliance. Others had sent junior representatives, a calculated insult that demonstrated their diminished respect for Council proceedings. The High Counselor, his skin a muted blue that spoke of strain and fatigue, called the session to order. We welcome Ambassador Morrison, representing the Human-Arcturian Alliance, who joins us to discuss terms for renewed cooperation between our respective governments. Jake stepped to the podium, feeling the weight of history in the moment. 5 years ago, he had walked out of this chamber, believing he might never return. Now he stood before a diminished council, holding the stronger position in negotiations that would shape galactic politics for centuries to come. Esteemed members of the council, he began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. I come before you today not to discuss Earth's return to this body, but to propose a new relationship between the Alliance and the Council, one based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The High Counselor's skin flickered with surprise. Ambassador, we had understood that you were here to negotiate Earth's readmission. Earth has no desire to return to its former status, Jake interrupted smoothly. Nor do the 33 other species that have joined our alliance. What we propose instead is a concordat between equals, the Council and the Alliance as parallel organizations, each with its own sphere of influence, cooperating on matters of mutual concern. This is unprecedented, the Thraxian delegate chittered angrily. The Council has been the supreme authority in galactic affairs for 12,000 years. And perhaps that is precisely the problem, Jake replied. 12,000 years of the same structure, the same hierarchies, the same assumption that elder species must guide the younger. The galaxy has changed. Should its governance not evolve as well? The Vordilian representative's gelatinous form pulsed with agitation. This sounds like a demand for the Council to surrender half its authority. Not surrender, Jake corrected. Share, adapt, grow. The Alliance has demonstrated that a different model of interspecies cooperation is possible, one where technological innovation is encouraged rather than restricted, where military development is balanced by ethical constraints that each member helps formulate, where trade benefits all participants rather than reinforcing existing power structures. He gestured around the chamber. Look at what the last 5 years have brought. Species that were once marginalized are now flourishing within the Alliance. Quantum technology, properly regulated, has created unprecedented prosperity across our systems. Piracy has been virtually eliminated in Alliance space. Through military force, the High Counselor noted. Through consequences, Jake countered. Pirates target the vulnerable. When we demonstrated that our worlds were not vulnerable, that attacks would be met with overwhelming response, the problem largely solved itself. For hours, the debate continued, with council delegates alternating between outrage, disbelief, and reluctant consideration of Jake's proposals. Throughout it all, he remained calm and resolute, neither yielding nor antagonizing. This was no longer about humanity proving itself. It was about reshaping a galactic order that had grown stagnant and complacent. As the session finally drew to a close, the High Counselor addressed Jake directly. Ambassador Morrison, the Council will need time to consider these proposals. But I must ask, if we were to reject them entirely, what then? Jake met the Alteran's gaze steadily. Then we would continue as we have these past 5 years, building our alliance, developing our technologies, protecting our interests. The question, High Counselor, is not what happens to us if you reject cooperation, but what happens to the Council if half the galaxy chooses a different path. The message was clear without being explicitly threatening. The Council could adapt, or it could decline, but it could not restore the status quo ante. Later, as Jake departed the chamber, he found Admiral Carter and Director Hayes waiting in the antechamber. Carter's expression was grim. Hayes's thoughtful. "How did they respond?" Carter asked. "About as expected," Jake replied. "Shock, denial, anger, bargaining. They haven't reached acceptance yet, but they will." "You think they'll agree to the Concordat?" Hayes asked. Jake nodded slowly. "They don't have much choice. Too many species have seen the benefits of our approach. The Council can fight the tide or swim with it, but they can't stop it." "And once they agree," Carter pressed, "what then?" Jake looked out through the transparent walls of the antechamber, at the swirling nebula that housed the Council headquarters, a spectacular view that had once filled him with awe and now seemed merely picturesque. "Then we build something better," he said quietly. "Not perfect. Nothing created by imperfect beings ever is. But better, more just, more adaptable. A galactic order that values innovation alongside stability, that protects the vulnerable without stifling their growth." He turned back to his colleagues, the weight of the past 5 years visible in the lines around his eyes, but also a quiet satisfaction. The day mankind departed the Galactic Council was the day the universe learned we would not be underestimated. The day we return on our terms will be the day the universe learns we can be valuable partners, if treated with respect. Carter smiled slightly. "And if they forget that lesson?" Jake's expression hardened for just a moment, revealing the steel that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. "Then we'll remind them, as many times as necessary." Together, they walked toward the docking bay where their ship waited, not as supplicants or junior partners, but as representatives of a power that had rewritten the rules of a 12,000-year-old game in just 5 short years. Behind them, the council chamber buzzed with urgent conversations as delegations debated the inevitable: adaptation or obsolescence. The choice, in the end, was theirs. But the future, that belonged to those bold enough to seize it.